Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Unleash Your Voice. I'm your host, Priya Sam, and today's guest is the definition of an empowered woman. Robin Goad is a senior executive at Amazon Web Services with more than 30 years of leadership across Fortune 100 companies, which also includes Dell and Gartner. She's closed billion-dollar deals, been recognized as Dell's Working Mother of the Year, and built a reputation as a powerhouse in rooms where few women sit. Behind the titles, she's experienced childhood trauma, divorce, a breaking point that forced her to confront the lies she believed about herself. That moment became her turning point. Robin is now the author of Girl by Birth, Woman by Fire, the creator of the Real Framework, and the Unwritten Rulebook, practical strategies to help ambitious women master corporate power dynamics without losing their souls. Today, we're talking about visibility, shadow power maps, curiosity as a superpower, and what it really takes to go from invisible to influential. Robin, welcome to Unleash Your Voice.
Thank you so much for having me, Priya. I look forward to the chat.
Me too.
I always get so intimidated when I hear that bio. It's a little embarrassing. I'm proud. Obviously, I am so proud of all of that, but it also is just a little humbling. It embarrasses me to sit there and listen to all that, which I don't know why. I should be proud of it. I am proud, but it's also like I want people to go, "Oh, don't think about all that. I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy." No, just kidding. Remember that line in the movie?
Yes. Well, you know what, Robin? That's actually one of the things I loved about you because I've listened to other interviews you've done, and you are such a powerhouse. And you also have this ability to be so relatable and approachable, which I think is such a powerful combination. So I feel you on the
Thank you.
oh, yeah. I mean, and hearing everything that you've accomplished in one 30-second
Exactly.
intro. Yeah,
Exactly.
but it's so impressive.
I should be so proud of it. I am. I am so proud of it. But I'm also like, okay, don't everybody believe all that hype. I'm just a girl, girl by birth, woman by fire. I've been through it. Don't believe all that press, right? I think that's part of it too. It's like,
Yeah.
Sometimes you see an athlete that starts believing their press and it's the downfall of them, right? And
Absolutely.
anyway, thank you. I just think it's authenticity. I think if you're a human, I don't know how anybody could hear their highlight reel in 30 seconds and not have a little bit of humility and that pops up in there. And if they don't, then they probably aren't a very nice person to be around, quite frankly.
I totally agree with you. And I think that's such a good point about the people who kind of let it get to their heads and then they show
Yeah.
up differently, right? And then all of a sudden that's not the person you want to learn from and you want to hear from.
Yeah.
I ask all of my guests this question. And as I was thinking about asking you this question, I was like, I wonder what she's going to choose because I know you have a lot of moments in your career that you can use. But tell me about a time in your career that you've unleashed your voice.
I will say it kind of goes with that authenticity comment that I just brought up. And I'll tell you the story behind the using my voice. I was asked to lead a team in India and Singapore, and I got some pushback, or my boss got some pushback internally from the APJ leaders saying, "You are crazy. You cannot send a blonde white woman to India to do business with the Tata Group." They were wanting, Michael Dell had run into one of the CEOs at the Economic World Forum, one of the CEOs of one of the Tata companies. And he came back and said to my boss, "Hey, we are not doing any business with this $70 billion company. And we need to get some focus here on this Tata Group." And so they came to me and said, "Would you be interested in this challenge?" I, of course, said yes. And then internally, the leaders from the APJ region were calling saying, "Y'all are nuts. You cannot send this white blonde Texas woman to India to try to do business with this company." And so I had just started working with one of the business areas, Tata Communications specifically, and I had just started working with these guys. And I called the most senior leader in the organization and I said, look, there's some feedback that is coming around inside of Dell that it's probably not a good idea to have a Western, white, blonde woman from Texas leading this relationship. And look, if that is true, I just need you guys to tell me because at the end of the day, Michael Dell wants this relationship to be mutually beneficial, and we will assign somebody from Singapore, we'll assign somebody from India, we will assign anybody. Don't worry about me. I will not take this personal. I don't take it personal. If this is cultural and you guys are be honest with me, I will step away and I'll go do something else. But at the end of the day, we want to be successful. And the senior most leader, chief operating officer for Tata Communications, he said, Robin, this is the problem. Everybody that wants to do business with us at this level, they all assign somebody from Singapore or another Indian male to come lead our business. And that is not what we want. That is not what we need. We need somebody like you that will think differently, bring a different approach. I don't need another Indian male telling me how to run my business. I have plenty. I need you. I need somebody like you. And so I came back internally and went all the way up to the highest levels in the organization. And I said, hey, I know you're getting some feedback. I know you're getting some pushback from APJ leadership. I just want to let you guys know you're welcome to call, but I have verified with the customer that absolutely not. They do not want, in fact, another Indian male assigned to this business. They actually want somebody like me that thinks differently and brings a different approach. And do you know, within 6 months of being on that account, I had a one-on-one meeting with Michael Dell and Ratan Tata. Michael Dell and Ratan Tata in 6 months. I was in a meeting with both of them because I had a different approach. Because I had a different. Do you think if they would have assigned somebody from Singapore or another Indian male that they would have? I opened doors and I did it with authenticity. And Ratan Tata looked me in the eyes in that meeting and he said, I know you did all this and I just want to thank you. And he said, authenticity cannot be faked. And I sense how authentic and how much you care about this relationship. Now, he did not know a thing in the world about that conversation that I had had 6 months prior, right? He had no idea that they were trying to kick me off of that account. But it's just, I think women especially don't need to be afraid of confronting some controversy like that, right? And I at that point in time in my career, I was confident enough to even have that conversation with the and I knew if the answer had come back and said, "Yeah, Robin, you know what? It's true. You know what? It's true. You're not going to be respected. You're not going to be viewed as an equal." Whatever that answer would have been, if they would have, said that, I would have come back to Dell and I would have said, "Hey, Paul, you know what? You need to assign someone else to this account. It's going to be the best thing." But it ended up turning out, and it's actually one of the highlight. I mean, that is obviously one of the very most highlights of my career, for sure.
This is such an important reminder that those skills, that way of being, that authenticity, like sometimes I think these things get lumped into this like, oh, those are soft skills. Those are nice to have skills, but they're so strategic, right? Like you got this big meeting because of your authenticity, because of the way you were able to build trust. And that's so powerful. And it's such a powerful example of how that works in the world of business in like a strategic way that literally turns into profit and dollars. So thank you for sharing that.
Exactly. Exactly.
I wonder, I know that you and I both have this journalism background in common. And something we learn a lot about, of course, in journalism training is communication and relationship building. So I'm curious, how did that impact your career?
Yeah, it elevated me. I mean, really, it elevated me at a different level. It exposed me to how things I didn't even know about. So, for example, I thought that, sales leaders at Dell, that our job is to get a customer, find what their, challenges are, go solve a problem, sell them some computers, sell some data center stuff, right? But what I learned when you get to that level, like the Michael Dell CEO to CEO, chairman of the board to chairman of the board level, they're thinking about things like joint ventures. How do you go to market in a disruptive way with a partnership with another $70 billion company? It exposed me to different levels of conversation. And it wasn't just about selling. Yeah, what was their transaction of dollars going back and forth? Of course there was. But it was really about understanding who Dell was as a company at that time, who Tata was as a company at that time, and what they wanted to be, what both companies wanted to be in the future. And then even setting that up, and I will tell you, that is something, that little nugget right there of having that in your back pocket I just did it last week, as a matter of fact. I sat down with the senior leader of a new defense tech startup, and I said, look, I've read everything about you guys online. I've looked at all your press clippings. Congratulations, fantastic. But what can you tell me about who you want to be when you grow up? Not as a person, but as a company. Because I promise you, every CEO or every C-suite executive, they aren't thinking about what's being sold today. They're not thinking about what their business is doing today. They're thinking about what their business what do they want to be when they grow up? And so that whole exchange really expanded my scope of what's even before that experience, I didn't even know what a joint venture between two large global organizations meant, or that even something like that would be on the table. And so being exposed at that level, it broadened my perspective on how large global companies can really do business together. And it was much more than, it was really all about, what do I want to be when I grow up? And can I do it alone? Or do I need other partnerships? And do I need another, what kind of ecosystem do I need to create to help me get to that? And that's very valuable. And it really changes you from just a salesperson and a sales leader to a business person. It just changes your scope and your perspective.
Absolutely. Oh, like asking the right questions like that in those
So
bigger
important.
spaces and the research part of it. I love that you mentioned that because there's the baseline of kind of like reading the board reports and doing the research on the media clippings like you said, but then you really take it to the next level by asking the questions that other people aren't asking. I love that question of what do you want to be when you grow up and like what's the future vision for the
Yeah.
company. And I think those are questions like as women and like we also need to be asking ourselves in the workplace, right? What do we see in our futures? And one of the things you teach is that visibility is king. I know it's a topic you're really
Oh my
passionate
gosh.
about. So, what does strategic visibility actually look like from your experience?
Yeah. Strategic visibility, I would say, is even more important than your results. Actually, I'm going to look this up. Here it is. This is an ex CEO ranking 5 office political strategies. Okay, CEO. Now, I already say this in my book and I already have this in my framework, but this is an ex CEO. And number one most important office political strategy is political intelligence. Number 2 is relationships, strategic, executive presence. Number 4 is raw performance. Number 4, this is why this really struck me. And then number 5 is your actual expertise. So
Unbelievable.
if
Wow.
you do not think, yes, I can say it, and I do say it, But that is the CEO saying that political intelligence, relationships, and executive presence are all above your actual results and your expertise. So one of the things that I talk about in career coaching or just corporate strategy is how it doesn't matter who you know, it's who knows you and who knows your narrative. And you have to get really good at telling your stories. And I call it the 7-minute rule in my book. I talk about I can go back 20 years and give you examples of 7-minute conversations that changed my career. And my most recent one is the job that I'm in now. I had a 7-minute meeting with my boss. He wasn't my boss at the time, but I had a 7-minute, my colleague introduced me to him. And she said, "Hey, I want you to meet Robin. She's a remote employee. She happens to be here. He happened to not be on the phone." And I just said, look, here's what I've been doing. Here's what I think we need to do. And he said, "You know what, Robin?" He looked at his watch and he said, "I've been at this company 9 months and I have been trying to find somebody that could say that understood and said what you just said." And he looked at his watch and he goes, "Oh, that only took 7 minutes." And I laughed and I said, "Well, it's because I know what I'm talking about. This is not rocket science." And so he promoted me, right? That he took me out from underneath my direct manager that reported to him. He was my skip level. And he said, "I'm going to get you to report directly to me." And
Wow.
it was a 7-minute conversation. And it was the fact that I could articulate what I knew, how I knew it, the value it delivered. And because of the homework, like you just talked about, and because I know business, by this point in time in my career, I know it does not take me very long to figure out what a business needs. I can I can be in a few meetings, I can ask the questions, and I can tell where we are hurting, struggling, what the business needs. And I know what I know, what I know. And so I have a lot of confidence whenever I said, "Look, we have a huge problem. Here's my opinion on what it is. Here's how I've solved it in the past. And here's how I solved it in this little scope that I have this year. Here's how I solved it. I think we need to do it across your entire organization." And he said, "You're right." And that took 7 minutes. And you have just articulated something I've been around here 9 months trying to get people to understand.
That's incredible. You hit on there were so many good points here. The storytelling, the articulation piece, those are two of the biggest things I work with my clients on. And you're right, it's such a game changer. You can have the best ideas, the most incredible experience, but if you cannot clearly communicate it and know your audience, right, in a way that resonates with that person you're talking to, it doesn't matter. Like, they're not going to see it unless you can share it in a way that is effective. And stories and that clear and elevated articulation too, right? When you get to the higher levels in the company, you can't be speaking with entry level language anymore because it's not going to land. So I love that you
No.
just captured all of that in that one answer. That's amazing.
It is so true. And it's, I had a conversation with him yesterday and he actually said, I'm really struggling with communication and having the front office and at that level, at his level, he has way too much, right? It's easy for me to communicate what I did in that 7 minutes, because I knew like I said, I knew what I knew, right? I knew the problem the business was facing. I've been doing this 30 years. I know what a technology company at this point in time in the growth, I know what struggles we have. So I could clearly articulate it and I could offer a solution. But when you get to his level, it is even more important because he has so much more scope, right? He has so much more scope and bandwidth. So he has 10 leaders that are reporting to him. And all of those 10 leaders need to be able to do that exact same thing that I just articulated so that he can then turn around to his leadership for all of worldwide public sector, and he can articulate the value of his organization. Because if he is not about, communicate doing the exact same thing across his business, then he's losing credibility by the day with his leadership. And so I think as somebody, I always like to make my bosses look great. I want to give them their talking points. And people get mad. They're like, Robin, all of your stuff is always featured. Today we're having a sales kickoff for 2026. And one of the stories my boss is telling in that global worldwide audience is my team's success. Well, why is that? Because I give him the nuggets, right? I'm giving him the story that he wants to tell. And so even if you are a director level leader, it's on you, really. This is not just for the junior. Yes, it is 100% imperative if you are an entry level or a junior level in an organization. It is imperative for you, or you will not have a successful career. But even at the director or RVP kind of level, you have to do the same, because you're trying to make your boss look good. And if you aren't doing that, you're doing yourself a disservice, quite frankly.
Absolutely. And I think this connects really well to the next piece here, which is about what you call the shadow power map. So, one of the things you say is that the org chart as we see it is fiction, and we really need to understand what the shadow power map is. So, can you break that down for us? And,
Yeah.
how does somebody actually identify where that real power sits?
Yeah. Pay attention. I mean, that is, be curious. I cannot say, I think that, the journalism and the reporter, the truth teller in me is what has made me so successful, because I am genuinely curious. I have whether I'm sitting across from my boss and I'm looking internally at our business, or whether I'm doing it with a client and I'm genuinely curious about their business, it's fascinating to me. People are fascinating to me. Business and people are fascinating to me. And so, that be curious about how things are really happening in the organization. Now, obviously, an org chart does tell you who is in charge. Absolutely, no doubt about it. And you need to take a minute and look at that internal org chart and figure out who's ultimate decision maker, right? However, there is also the shadow power map that I'm talking about, and that is who is influencing. Who is influencing those decisions? Who is that executive leader looking to inform? Do they have a strategy person? Is that front office person really the person that is feeding them the information? And I'm telling you, oftentimes it is. And also, don't think for a second that org chart, just because there are 10 direct reports to the worldwide leader, does not mean all 10 people have the same weight in that leader's point of view. And so you will start to see, who does that leader talk about? What name, when that leader is telling a story, just like my boss is telling a story today, whose story is he telling? He's telling my story. So what does that tell you that he thinks about me? Would he be telling my story if he did not think highly of me and my organization? No, he would not. So be listening and have that, whose name gets mentioned, who's the backfill when that leader is not able to go to a speaking engagement. Who do they send? Who are they always hanging out with at SKO? Who is standing around them at the bar? Who is standing around them at the coffee, station? Who are they hanging out with? Because that's who has the power. Those are the people that they are listening to. So oftentimes we train our sales leaders to do all of this, like who's an influencer, who has responsibility, right? We do that outside of our organizations. We do it at our clients when we're trying to find out who's going to help us close this deal, but we very rarely do it internally. And we've got to start doing that internally, because that's going to tell you where the power lies and who people listen to and whose opinion they value. So anyway, I strongly encourage folks to take a look at your org chart, color code it, right? Who's talked about, who really has power. I've even looked at, I've seen VPs and EVPs roll their eyes when someone's speaking that is, a direct report. There is, what's their reputation? Like, just because there is a leader that reports to the executive, when that person's name is mentioned, what do other people say? Is it a positive response? Is there eye rolling? Is there deep exhale? That tells you that that person probably does not have a very strong brand in the executive leadership chain of command. And yeah, they're equal on the org chart, but it doesn't mean they get listened to.
There are so many golden nuggets here, Robin, and I think like this overarching theme of just really observing how people are interacting. I really loved your comparison to, in sales, we do this all the time. You're right, like the word multi-threading, just how it comes up in every big deal that closes, right? Oh, we were multi-threading. We had multiple champions. We were working with multiple stakeholders. And I really like that is such a clear example of just take that strategy and apply it to your own career and do it internally, because promotions don't happen because one person is advocating for you. They happen because in a room full of people, someone suggested and other people chime in, are like, yes, absolutely, because they know your stories. Like you said, right? They know your stories. They've seen your contributions and experienced you. And likely you've been working that shadow power map in a really strategic way. Oh,
Exactly.
I absolutely
Exactly.
love this.
And I will tell you a real life example of how to do this. When I was at Dell, there was a group of about 10 women. And this wasn't my idea. This was a woman who she was an electrical engineer, either electrical or mechanical. I can't remember, but she was an engineer and her undergrad was from Cornell and her master's was from Northwestern. So smart woman, right? She told us, and she was in sales operations, and she told us, she said, there's history, there's data behind this, but I want to tell y'all about what we need to be doing around here. We need to create a mutual admiration society. And you only let 8 players in your little secret society, but you bring together a group of about 10 to 12 women that are from all different. Don't just pick salespeople. Don't just, if you're an engineer and you're in operations, don't just pick people in your line of business. Go find people outside your line of business to bring into your group. And what you do is you say, okay, Sharon, what do you want your narrative? What is the story you want told about you at the end of this year? And she gave us, each person would write down and say, here are the 7 sentences. If my name is ever mentioned in a meeting that you're in, here are the 7 talking points I would like you to say about me. And we wrote them out and we shared them among our little group. And I'm going to tell you right now, every single woman that was in our group was promoted within a year. And I sat down with my boss at the end of the year and he read back to me my narrative that I had planted. I had planted what I wanted to be said about me. He came back and was like, oh, did you know Travis said this about you? Did you know? And it feels a little like manipulation. It's a little, it feels a little less authentic than I would like to operate. But nothing that I fed into the system wasn't true. I wasn't, pitching a false narrative. It was all true. I just needed other people to be able to help share my story and tell my story for me. And same thing, I learned what they wanted me to say about them. And we did it. We did it for one another. Every single person was promoted and my narrative came back to me at my performance review. And I just sat there kind of chuckling, honestly, because it was, at first I thought, this can't be true. I mean, it can't be this easy. It can't be this easy to get ahead or, it was. It was. Now, we did not let any C or B players in our group. That is what is, you cannot lose your credibility on workers that aren't bringing the value.
Yeah.
You have to only allow people in your club that are bringing the value and that you would put your name beside, right? I mean, but it worked and it blew my mind. But I've done it ever since. I've done it ever since. At every company, every role I've had, I've played this same game and it worked. It is a game. That is the thing that women, it is a game and you do not play and win games, whether it's a corporate America game or whether it's a rugby game. You do not play games without a strategy.
Yes.
And this is just a strategy and it works. So,
And you know what? Men are doing it all the time. Like, this is
all the
the
time.
same way they're getting ahead. So why shouldn't we also be doing the same thing, right? I mean,
Yes.
yes. And like, also, in some ways, we have to be more intentional about it because for a lot of women, it's not in our nature, right, to be thinking about things strategically. And you even said like it's a little less authentic than I would like it to be, because I think society has also conditioned us as women to not strategize in the same way that men are really conditioned to do from a young age. They don't think twice about doing this kind of stuff. And so,
Exactly.
yeah,
It's
I
smart.
really, yeah, it's
It's
smart. It's
smart.
smart. 100%.
It's
It
smart.
is.
It's not
Yeah.
manipulation. It's
No.
smart. It's playing the game by the rules that exist. And
Yeah.
so if we don't talk about this is the reality. This is the reality of the game I'm playing.
Yeah.
So I might want to shoot 3-pointers all day long every day, but if that strategy doesn't win that game, then I have to switch my strategy. And so this is just the way this game is played. And so, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. But you
Yes.
have to know that. If I would have known that at 25 versus 45, my career would have been completely different. But it's how men think. It's how they strategize. They really are better native, like you just I believe, how God made them. I think that men are just better at that strategic planning and thinking than women are. We are relational. We are relational beings from a very early age. I have a daughter and I have 3 boys. And I can tell you, having a daughter and having 3 boys, boys start strategizing war games at a very early age. Girls are sitting there playing with dolls for the most part. They are relational. They sit around in circles and talk. Look at a playground. Go to a playground and look at the little girls. They're all talking. And the boys are wargaming how they're going to go take the hill or, whatever the case may be. And so it's just adapting. It is adapting to the environment that you're in. And that's how, maybe I'm rationalizing it to make me feel better and make it feel a little more authentic. But it's just the reality of the game I'm playing. And like all games I play, I want to play by the rules.
100%. Yes. Okay. So I really love that during this conversation, you have walked us through, starting with identifying that shadow power map and really figuring out, who has control over decisions and who you should be targeting with your own advocacy. Then we talked about the strategic visibility, right? So once you've identified those key players, making sure that your work is strategically visible. And I know some people listening, they might be in that position right now where they're feeling invisible. So, can you walk us through your real framework and, where can people get started if maybe some of this is feeling a little overwhelming and they just want that first thing they should do?
Sure. So the real framework is the R is recognizing your superpower. And here's as a woman, you cannot get confident. You cannot really be confident if you do not know what your superpower is. And once you know your superpower, then like the comparison game and what so and so is doing and it doesn't go away because we can't, I wish it could magically all go away. It doesn't go away completely, but I operate in my strength. But recognize your superpower is the R, and E of the real is establishing your strategy. So how do I take my superpower and turn that into value for the organization? So, what is my strategy? So, for example, my superpower is in a very quick time, I can listen to a conversation from a business leader. I can start putting the puzzle pieces together of who's the ecosystem of partners, who in the organization. I just start problem solving and putting together a strategy in my mind very quickly. Then I execute. So I'm not just a strategy person that doesn't execute. A lot of strategy people just create strategy and they don't know how to go execute it. But I have the gift of I see it, I hear a problem, I see a strategy to solve it, and then I can go put together a plan to execute it. That is my superpower. So, how do I align? How do I take that, establish my strategy on how do I go solve that for my company? Then I align. The A in real is aligning all of that, your superpower and your strategy, to the business value. So what is it that what are my boss's priorities this year? What's the company's priorities this year? I just did a talk in DC at an AWS meeting, a town hall the other day, and there were two leaders that spoke before me, and I was giving a coaching on how to be the CEO of your own career. And I said, "Look, guys, your boss and her boss have just spent the last 30 minutes telling you what their 2026 strategic initiatives are. If you do not take that right now today and align your business, your strategy, your value, if you do not align, and every time you talk to them, every time you talk to these leaders for this year, align your message to what they just told you, what they care about, right?" And then the
Yes.
L in the real framework is obviously leading with authenticity because, I've shared how important authenticity is to me. And everybody likes to be led. Nobody likes to be managed, but everybody likes to be led. And so if you lead with authenticity, your people will feel it. You can't fake it. You can't. Authenticity cannot be faked. And Ratan Tata, whenever I had that meeting, with him and Michael Dell, he said, "I know you did all this, and authenticity passes all cultural barriers. It passes org charts. It passes everything. We're human. At the end of the day, we are all human beings. And people, when you come in contact with somebody, if you can trust them or not. And that all stems from operating authentically. And so lead with that authenticity. It is more valuable than you can possibly comprehend, really.
Yes. And speaking of authenticity, we've spoken a lot about your career and you've given us so many incredible nuggets and takeaways for how to apply this to getting ahead in the corporate world. And I know that you have also shared a lot of your personal life. You have been open about trauma and divorce and hitting a breaking point. So, can you share with us, what those experiences and that turning point in your life changed for you and maybe, what you were believing at the time and how you rewrote the ending of that story?
Yeah, I say corporate America is a really good place for a broken little girl to get all of her validation. And it's also a very dangerous place for a broken little girl to get all of her validation. But I grew up with an abusive alcoholic stepfather. I had a lot of childhood trauma at a very young age. And I became really addicted to performance and to affirmation. that, and that started long before corporate America. But I say, if you look at folks that have trauma in their life, there's all different type of coping. There's all different types of mechanisms that people use. I thank God I didn't turn to drugs and alcohol because so many do. I turned to, I remember making a conscious decision not to turn to drugs and alcohol because I knew myself and I knew that if I did, I would become addicted and I would not be able to get out of it. And so I never opened that door. And right, wrong, or indifferent, I became addicted to the approval and the acceptance that I got. I mean, there's a high, when you are closing hundreds of millions of dollars, $1 billion deals, there is a high to that. I never even thought about the paychecks. I'm going to tell you, I was not motivated by the money, but I was motivated by the win, like winning and having somebody say I was the best, I was the best solution. I won. It was all about that validation for me. And the breakdown that is talked about in my book and is I was in my 30s. My first marriage was ending. I called a friend of mine and I said, look, I wanted to run away. I wanted to run away from my marriage. I wanted to run away from my kid. I just wanted to run away. And I called a friend of mine and said, do you still have a key under your mat at your cabin on the river? And she said, yeah. And I said, can I please go out there for a few days? And I call that my nervous breakthrough. And that's really when I started recognizing, so laying in the fetal position in the floor at that cabin. And I want to say I was maybe 30 years old about this time. I recognized that I had believed a lie as a 7-year-old child that was not true. It was a lie that I had believed, and that was if my own mother does not love me enough to protect me from this abuse, then who could possibly love me? I must be unlovable if my own mom didn't protect me, didn't shield me. And that was a lie. That was a 7-year-old point of view, but it had stuck with me. And so if you do not feel that you are a lovable person, then you will make destructive decisions because you believe that I'm not lovable. I must not be lovable. And so I had to face that lie and call it a lie because it was a lie. And my mother she did 90 things that proved her love for me, but the lack of protection from this abusive alcoholic stepfather was what I held on to, that if she would have really loved me, if I was lovable, she would have gotten me and protected me and in that environment, and she didn't. And so I came to realize that that was a lie that I had believed, and I was married to someone who wasn't nice to me, and I decided after that it was time to, get divorced and that unraveled. I mean, there's a ton more we can unpack on all of that, but it became a moment in time in my life when I said, if that is a lie that I have believed that is not true. And so what I've learned also that you have to replace the lie with a truth. So if there is a lie that was a core belief in my body that I believed for 23 years, then what is the truth that I'm going to replace that lie with? And that truth is I am absolutely worthy of being loved and being valued and being protected and having worth. Like that is, I am going to get rid of the lie that I am unlovable and I'm going to replace it with the truth that I am absolutely lovable and worthy to be loved and protected and valued. Another lie that I believed was that I wasn't smart. I believed that because I struggled in math, I was not smart. Now, I also have an ex-husband who told me I was fat, stupid, and ugly pretty much every day. And so I believed that I wasn't smart because I wasn't a good accountant. So I I'm like, okay, that is so not true. I am so smart. Just because I have this one area that is not my strength does not mean, again, that these other 90 things about me, look at all this other value I have. to bring. And so that's, I think as women, it's so much about your family and what people pour into your life. You really have to start examining what are those lies. If you have limiting beliefs about yourself, what lies might those be based on? And if you find out what those are, then let's replace those with a truth that you as an adult woman can say, no, that is not true. And that is not serving. How is it serving you? Right? If something that you believe about yourself is not serving you well and it does not have fruit that you can see a benefit, and then let's change that. Let's fix that. And I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a spiritual like pastor or minister or any of that. I'm just a girl, that has literally had to figure all of this out on my own, the hard way, figuring it out on my own. And so at this point in time in my life, on my 54th birthday, I just want to go back and grab all those Robins that are 25. I just want to go back to them and just grab them and start speaking truth and start speaking wisdom and start giving them all of the life lessons that I now know at this age of my life. And I just want to go reach back and help them. And that's, I tell my friend, I'm over myself. Like I'm so over myself at this point, in my life. I just want to go back and start helping and pouring into the lives of women that are much younger. And I just want to see them get to where I am now so much earlier. Right. So that's a little bit about all the trauma. There's a lot more I could unpack, but we'd be here all day if I did.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And honestly, like by doing like this interview, that's exactly what you're doing. I mean, you are using your story and your experiences to help other people. I know that so
Thank
many
you.
people who listen to that are going to be able to relate and are going to find hope in everything that you just
Hope
shared.
so.
So thank you so much. I also know that after this, people are going to want to connect with you and follow you. So what is the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, really, my website is probably the best way because you can schedule. I give free 30 minutes. There's a button on my website that says schedule, and I dedicate time on Tuesdays and Thursdays. People can go directly book on my calendar. And since I'm honest about that, please, if you don't know what your superpower is, or you just want to have a conversation, please book time with me. It's really all about other people. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn, Robin Goad, all the social media. You can get me on Facebook, Robin Goad, on Instagram. I'm 50 favored and figuring it out. But all those links are on my website. And my book, you can buy my book. It just launched a month ago. And so that's also on the website. But my website, by the way, is therealrobingoad.com.
Amazing. Okay, we'll put that in the show notes so everyone can access it really
Okay.
easily. And Robin, I just want to thank you so much. I hope that for everyone listening, I hope they were sitting somewhere where they could take notes because this was like I feel like we all just got a crash course in strategic visibility, finding our superpowers, and really navigating the workplace as women using the strategies that men use all the time to get ahead. So thank you so much for this.
Oh, thank you. It feels so good to me. Like this is just, I know it's what I am meant to do for the rest of my days. It fills my cup so much to think that there are women out there listening to this. It's kind of funny. I've heard from some men recently that have said, "Hey, why are you leaving us out?" It's kind of funny that they're like, "We've been listening to your stuff and we've been reading your book and this is good advice. We need this too." I said, "Yeah, that's fine. If you want to get it, great. But I really want the women out there to have somebody that they can, look to and get this advice." So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. And you're right. I mean, everyone can benefit this, but yeah, as women, obviously we experience the world, especially the corporate world in such a different way. So really, really appreciate everything. Thank you so much, Robin.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. And thank you to everyone who is joined us today. If you enjoyed this episode, reach out. Like Robin would love to hear from you. I love hearing from you. And of course, I always appreciate a 5-star review, and make sure you follow the show. There are new episodes coming out every Tuesday. I will see you next week on Unleash Your Voice.